We're here today with Earl Bush, who's been collecting local antiques and local history for a little over 40 years. And today he's going to show us some of our local pottery and the techniques used to make it. So if you would, Earl, please show us what you have here.
Well, we start off with showing you different photographs. Once the pottery was made, of course, they would have to have it dried out, and they would have a drying room where the pottery would be placed to dry out 2 or 3 days, depending on the climate. And then it would be taken to the pottery, which is the pottery. And the inside of this is a drawing showing how the pottery would be stacked. And there would be about 1,000 pieces of pottery placed in that bottle-shaped kiln. Now there would be fires inside of that kiln. Once that thing got up to 2,100 degree heat, then they would start introducing the salt into the fire, which that would make a mist, and it would come down on the pottery, and that's what would give it that shine, a little sheen to it, makes it glossy, and that's where they get the term salt glazed pottery. But then this, of course, would be a way of taking it down to wherever the destination might be. And this is a flatboat that they would go down the river and take orders. At every little port, they would take orders for pottery. After the Civil War, it became very popular for people to say, instead of putting your name on the pottery, that you made it and you put your name on, I'd like to have my name on it because I own a business.
So it was
it's a merchant.
Early form of advertising.
Advertising
okay.
on pottery. And it was very, very good. It did very well. And there was a lot of it sold. This is before you had the glass fruit jar.
Right.
So this is what they would use to store stuff, to put anything in it liquid, or put anything in it you needed to, to use. You could put pork in it, put grease in on top of it about that deep, and it was preserved. So it was an early means of keeping your food.
Right. Now I see that you have some fine examples of the things that you've been talking about. Would you care to share with us what you have here?
Yes, we'll start off with the Catlettsburg pottery. And there was 3 potteries that we know of for sure, and we'll show you examples of those. Probably this is the earliest form, the earliest piece that we have. And this was probably made in around 1850s, late 50s. So, and we do know that pottery existed at an early age, an early time.
Right.
And of course right here, this is all done by freehand. That blue is all done. There's some books that say that some of this was done by a deer with a deer's tail, which would make a good brush. Okay. So, and here's another one. And again, this is stenciled. They would cut a stencil and put this on. But all this and all the little lines and the bands on the bottom, and this is called cobalt blue. They ordered that indigo blue. And they would order that. It was the most costly part of the process of doing pottery. And anyway, they would freehand all these things. Now here's a piece. This is the only piece that we know of that has a date on it, 1861. Now there's some information on the internet that you can look at, and it says that the potteries didn't start until 1880. So this disproves that, because here is an example, a 3-gallon churn. This is stenciled. All the rest of it is done by freehand. Look how they executed that 3, wonderfully done. But those people were pretty good. And we call these tornadoes. We don't really know what they are, except it's just a colorful combination to make the thing appeal more to the wife.
Right. Now these are, they have Catlettsburg listed on these. Excuse me. Are those, so these are actually manufactured then in Catlettsburg?
All the pottery on the table and everything that we'll show you here was made in Catlettsburg. Like I said earlier, they had 3 potteries.
Right.
And we're showing you the earliest pottery, and his name was McLean. James LeGrand McLean. And this is the stuff that he made. And we'll show you a couple of examples of the other people.
Okay.
The other makers. But all of this comes down through here, and here again, this is another freehand 3 with just a little bit. Now this is a stencil that they would use, and they were a little later, they would put little lines around the numbers. Now those numbers represent the capacity of what the container would hold. A 3 would be 3 gallon, 4 would be 4 gallon. Now this is a churn and this is a churn, of course this being a jug, and these would be storage jars. And this is an early thing that they liked people like to try to find eagles on stoneware and pottery today from any town. But finding one from your local town within 7 or 8 miles is real good to find.
Right.
And we enjoy when we can find one of those. Now also, here is a 5 gallon churn. Now this is the only one that has an eagle, but he is a flying eagle. And now this is the only flying eagle that we know of. Not that there won't be 5 of them show up tomorrow, but as far as we know, this is the only one that we've ever found that is with a flying eagle.
Okay.
And before I go to the back row, I'd like to show an illustration. This is called a collar. It's a stacking collar. And it has different sizes of cutouts on it. And that was for the purpose of when they set the pottery in the kiln, see, they would turn that around and that would fit down on that jug and it would fit flat. Then they could stack another piece of pottery up on top of it. And that's the way they could go right on up. Now, not only did they use that, they would also, once they set that kiln and these pieces were placed, they would have stabilizers. This is just a piece of clay that was squeezed out, still green clay, and it would be placed on the jar and would actually stick to it a little bit. And then that would help hold the pottery in place while it was being fired. Okay?
Okay. And then once it was fired, what would just simply come along behind it then? And
Now this would be more than likely these pieces they would be discarded. Okay. They would start off with new. Sometimes they would reuse the collars, but these would be tossed out.
Right.
And when this thing was set, it was the first started off by wood fire. Everything they fired, they used wood. And it would take the guys kiln setters, they would take them a while to set the kiln, then they would start the fire. It would take about 3 days to get this thing up to where it was 2100 degree heat or more, and they didn't want to exceed 2400 degrees because if it got past that, 2800 degrees, it would actually melt, just fold up and melt in.
So they had to be very specific then with what they were doing.
Took about a week for them to start, once the pottery was made, for them to start the kiln as far as the heat. It had already been stacked, and then they would take it up to that degrees of heat gradually. And then once it got up to that 2100 degrees, they would introduce the salt into the fire, and when that would solidify and come down, just like dew of the evening, you go out to your automobile and you feel the dew where it's settled. Right. Well, that's what the salt did, and it gave it that salt glaze, that shine. Okay. Also, while they were doing getting the kiln ready to find out how many degrees heat it was. Now remember, this is 18 to 50, 60, 70, and so on, and they never had a thermostat on the wall to go by. So they would put a little piece of clay, green clay, put it on a rod, and they would put it back in there to determine. They'd pull it back out and look at it, and they'd test it and sample it. In some way they learned how to know when they was getting to a certain point. And that's what these are. These are little pieces of clay. Kind of hard to find because most of this stuff, once it was only used one time and thrown away. Right. They had a dump site that they would use for that. Okay?
Earl, we'd like to thank you for showing us all what you've taken the time to collect and explain to us where all this local pottery came from. You have a quite extensive collection.
Well, it's just taken years, but I appreciate you guys coming over and doing this. And I would like to see more younger people get involved with our heritage, our history of the tri-state area. The items that were made here were really good.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.